things happen. And we never question why good things happen. Give me more, please. I don't care if I deserve it or not. But bad things, how dare? And this is not being mean. This is why we suffer so terribly. Who can bear the pain of bad things happening? We can't. That's why, example, in 2003, when I was based in the States, in California, San Francisco, I was working with people in prison, and I remember Richard Gere in 2003 invited the Dalai Lama to New York. So we were discussing about him doing some kind of work in prison together, whatever. He did his own thing in the end. So at this event, he invited 20 former prisoners who'd all have done some kind of meditation in prison to meet the Dalai Lama, to come to the teachings in New York. And he invited a couple of people like me who were already working with people in prison. It was a very moving day. It was very amazing, you know. There were a cross-section of Americans, black, white, male, female, Puerto Rican, Mexican. Very moving day. They all met him, had talks. And he also invited 2 young Tibetan nuns who'd been kind of tortured and sexually abused in prison in Lhasa in Tibet. So clearly all these Tibetans, I mean, what I'm talking in this room is what's in their brain, which is what's in their mind. This is the view they've been brought up with. In the same way that we take it as a given that your mother made you, we take it as a given that your mind is the brain. We just don't question this. Is just the view of our world. That's the view of their world, and that's been around in Asia for several thousand years. Like I said, you know, this is their truth, and many of them study it seriously in the monasteries, you know, and meditate and realise it. So these young women, early 20s, you know, pretty intense suffering. And I got a feeling if the other Americans there, they probably could have, if you quantify suffering, they probably would have agreed that these young women's suffering was more than everybody else's. I mean, being tortured and sexually abused for a couple of years, kind of intense. But the point that was shocking, I think, was they weren't angry. And this is something again I want to talk about. It's very fascinating to us. This seems very unhealthy to us. We take anger as a really powerful and necessary, important state of mind. But they weren't angry. So that for us, we think they're suppressing. But this is the point. If you have the view of karma, you are experiencing the fruits of your actions, all the happiness and all the suffering. So just one. And that's something in your bones. You apply this daily. You live according to it. It becomes something natural for you. You take it for granted. Then you would not have anger. This is logical. In other words, you don't have the thought, how dare they do this to me? I don't deserve it. Because that's exactly what anger is saying. And it's not being critical about us. This is our suffering. This is why we suffer so stupendously. So the Buddha's suggesting, I'm not saying, not suggesting, and he's not asking you to believe him, he says the view that your mother made you is a mistake. There's some partial truth in it. There's no truth, he would say, in the Creator making you. He's not being rude. His view from his own experience is that we create ourselves. This law that runs us. You know, everything we experience is necessarily the fruit of actions like that, our tendencies, even our humanity, even the way the physical elements impact upon us. And this is all described in great detail, you know, in all the literature. So having this view naturally, and of course it's hard work. Who wants to get tortured? Nobody. They still have attachment and some aversion, but they'd have this view so deep in their bones that would inform the way they experienced that. So that was part of their practice. Talk about lojong, that's when it comes into play. There's this whole level of practice he mentioned, this Tibetan word, and the more advanced level in the compassion wing, which we'll talk about tomorrow. There's one whole level of practice when you're qualified, when you're really advanced, where you, like the woman in prison, where you learn to take this unbearable situation and find the good in it. For whose benefit? Yours. So these young women, telling their suffering in tears, one of them, and then one of them said, and of course, we had compassion for our torturers, because we knew we must have harmed them in the past, and because we know that they will suffer in the future as a result of their actions. So that's the bigger picture in the Buddhism. First you establish this in yourself in the wisdom wing if you choose to take this on board. No one's forcing us. It's the philosophy I'm using, absolutely is my view of the universe, as a basis of my practice. And I can say that's a major reason why my mind has changed. I don't get angry about the same things because I no longer say I don't deserve it, how dare you do that to me. It's still there, you feel it, but you work with it, you process it daily. And it becomes a very real thing for you. That's if you choose. I've chosen. I find it very powerful. I mean, frankly, also for me, I find it the most viable that I could come up with. explanation. And if I can prove Buddha wrong, that's fine, I'm prepared to. And so far, so good, I'm happy with what's happening so far. So these young women, having the view of karma, accepting the reality that they're suffering as a result of past actions, but this is also what the basis of compassion is. But when you've done it for yourself, then they were even able to see, because of any harm you do, you'll suffer in the future. Because of good you do, you'll get the result in the future. That's why if you take this view as your basis for understanding your garden, by learning what a weed is and where it comes from, and what a flower is and its cause, you then know what to do now to produce the future garden, because your garden will continue. So that's the real application of it. You don't sit there just feeling sorry for yourself, oh, I must have been a bad person. No. There are weeds there, you learn from it, you pull them out, and you don't grow more. There are flowers there, and you learn to know what are the laws of flowers, and you grow them. Speaking simply, you're in charge of the process. So feeling this in charge of a process is the main one that goes against the victim mode, the not my fault mode. I didn't ask to get born. Everyone else around me is doing it to me. That's the feeling very strongly we have. I've got some Buddhist friends in New York actually. They're a wonderful job. Social worker Buddhists. They can't bear the thought of karma. They feel embarrassed talking about it. They refuse to talk about it. They always invite me, and I always talk about it. People don't mind, so whatever reason. Maybe it's I crack jokes or something, I don't know. So anyway, the real point of this, every time the point of what I'm talking about before and the point of what I'm talking about now, I'm presenting the Buddha's view, okay? So the real question is what's gone on? It's not on. It's not on. It's not on. The real point of this is the experiential implication of it. That's the thing to find. To find the experiential application of it. Is there a button? Oh, okay. Thank you. And so, of course, if a person hears karma and can't hear any experiential application, well, honey, leave it alone, please. Take what you want. You can be a 1% Buddhist, No one says you can't. You're the boss, not Buddha. I like the big picture, and I always try to present the big picture. And you take this from this what you want, Any questions?
Yes, please.
Yeah, go.
So first question is to...
I'll repeat the question. Go on.
Okay, so the first one, what makes myself a self? How do I know I'm a person?
Good. I love you people. Your questions are great.
If my mind transcends myself, I mean, it goes way back and it goes...
That's right,
back.
exactly.
And I'm supposed to own the self.
That's right.
I'm responsible for both my past
That's
and
right.
my future.
Yes, you're the boss, babe.
Who am I?
A very good question. I love you people. Every one of your questions is so amazing. I love it. That's a really good. That's the whole point. That's what Buddha diverged from the Hindus. As the Dalai Lama said, was these amazing Hindus are the ones who first began the investigation into what is the self, essentially, finally, utterly. And that's where they use this meditation skill to unpack and unravel, remove all the layers of the nonsense, all the extra bells and whistles that we've added because of delusions, and getting ever more subtle, ever more subtle, ever more subtle, trying to come to the essence of what the self is. The Greeks call it an essence. The Christians call it a soul. Do you understand my point? So they went as far as they could go, and they found but the Buddha said he went further. You have to believe him, okay? And then he diverged in his own direction, exactly in relation to what is the self. So on the simple, okay. As Lama puts it, this is all the wisdom teachings lead to this one. As Lama puts it, when you really discovered the nature of what does exist, including the self, it's as if there's no self. But there is a self. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't. That'll give you a nice taste. And it's not meant to be just cosmic, silly words. These are the experience of the yogi. So the point is, in a conventional sense, the word self refers to simply a person. Person, self, me, I, they're all synonymous. So we are an example of a phenomenon called a self. So the Buddha's deal, which is what I'm implying all the time, I'll state it explicitly here. The Buddha's point is that all these delusions, all these neuroses, all these ridiculous states of mind that have the key function of adding bells and whistles to things. Do you know that phrase? that add extra pieces on top. The delusions, as long as it says, ego grasping, the root delusion, which we'll get to, on the basis of which there's attachment, on the basis of which there's aversion, on the basis of which there's jealousy and all the other ridiculous nonsense. Their key function is to embellish things, to add extra layers to things, to add extra pieces. So we're living in this kind of nightmare of drama, up and down like yo-yos, with all these fantasy expectations, these misconceptions, these delusions that add extra things on top of what is there. So as Lama Zopa says, all these delusions, these neurotic states of mind, basically are decorating on top of what is there, the self, the microphone, the cup. These neuroses are decorating on top of what is there, layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of characteristics that aren't there. This is the essence of what Buddha is saying. So the job of the initial stage is first control the servants of your crazy delusions and stop killing and lying and stealing and raping. At least calm yourself down there. Now you go to high school, you become your own therapist and get some concentration and really do the unpacking and unraveling and literally ridding these layers of nonsense from your mind until you get to the subtlest level where you get the deepest wisdom, where you then finally cut the root delusion from your mind that actually believes in this intrinsic, that exaggerates the very ontological status itself of the self and everything else. So that's Buddha's across the board what he's saying, that these neuroses in our mind, these ridiculous conceptual stories, these misconceptions that are eons old, many of which have this massive emotional component, you know, they are liars. And we have had these in our mind for so long, as Lama Zopa says, bad enough that the delicious chocolate cake, the chocolate cake out there appears back to me through the lenses of my emotional hunger, my attachment, and appears like a divine, delicious thing, such that when I get it, I'll get happy. That's the lie of attachment. Forget the boyfriend. He says, bad enough that the cake appears to us in a way that it doesn't exist. But the worst part is, because we've done it for so long, we believe that story. We believe everything that our mind thinks, and that's what keeps us paralyzed in samsara, keeps us paralyzed living in these fantasy worlds. We believe in these misconceptions, so the job is to remove the misconceptions from the mind, all the way down to the subtlest one, and we get to realize the true nature of self. That's just the general. I'm not telling you what the self is yet. I mean, I'm not even telling you what the self is, because in the end, you're not going to find what we think is the self. And this is the part that sounds very tricky and very kind of intellectual, but now I'm forced to talk about it.
Sorry to do that. My next question, if I can, is...
I'm about to tell you what it all is. Never mind. Ask your next question. Go on. Go on.
Is there really no value?
What, darling?
Is there really no value in what we call the negative states?
Which states? The negative ones. Okay, good. I understand.
Yeah,
I understand.
If I mean, this is what I believe. For
Yes.
instance, if I experience disappointment with, let's take the example again of the boyfriend, right?
Yes.
I learn something about myself.
That's right, precisely. You do.
Because I hold
Yes.
the belief, I
Yes.
hold some expectations.
That's right.
And he's not delivering.
That's right, exactly.
So there's value in that.
There is value, immense value, only if you see it like that. Look at the world, darling. I don't think the world thinks that way. And that's the point. Given that you've got delusions already, given that you've got negative karma and the boyfriend punches you in the nose, if you're working on it, you use it like those young nuns. It was huge grist for their mill. They learned so much from that experience. But the real learning is, I won't do it again. Like one night, you know, if you keep breaking your leg when you go skiing, it's a great learning experience. But the real learning is you stop breaking your leg, baby. You don't just keep wanting to break your leg so you can learn. You got it the first time. That's the point. So if you're practicing, given that this is a status quo, it can be powerful practice for you. But then the main learning is not, that's the whole point about causes and its suffering and its causes, you stop causing it. So you know that if your boyfriend punches you, you learn from that. You learn about the karma, and I will never punch again. I don't want that anymore. That's your real learning. And about yourself and him. You see my point? That's intelligent learning. You learn from your experience, in other words. And that just reminds me, my mother was completely attached to all her 7 children, and she overcompensated. That's what mothers do. Because my father was a bit ridiculous. He was an alcoholic. He did naughty things that fathers shouldn't do. I mean, I adore my daddy. But my father had a lot of wisdom. But my mother was just a fool. You know, I had her in my palm of my hand. Do you understand? because you can fool your mother. And my mother would always overcompensate, always pick me up when I shouldn't have been picked up, do my homework for me because I was lazy, because she was always trying to compensate. She probably felt guilty. My father always had this wisdom. Even though he was naughty, I trusted his wisdom. And he'd always say to my mother, for example, she did my homework one time. I remember this one. She wrote a poem that I was supposed to write. Well, she wrote it, she put a word in I didn't understand. Of course, the teacher knew, you know. I mean, my mother, this is what attachment does. It overcompensates. You understand, thinking she was being kind to me, but she wasn't. And my father would always say, she must learn from her own experience. And I was too proud to ask him what he meant. I'd listen and try to think about that. She's got to learn from her own experience. You've got to learn from your experience. And the conclusion is you won't do it again. That's the point. So that's now, yes. Yes, sweetie.
There are some people that are born with...
A little bit louder, darling.
There are some people that are born with some disabilities.
Yes, that's right.
This is a consequence of karma.
I understand. Everything that we think and do and say, everything we are is necessarily the fruit of our past actions. We're the creator, yes.
Is there any way to trace back which kind of...
Of course it is. When you've got wisdom, when you've got brilliant single point of concentration, you've got clairvoyance, you can locate every cause of every action. Of course you can. If it's a natural law, you'll be able to do that. But you don't need to. Because once you know, if you come out with a skin, you know what they call pimples or something, from eating too much chocolate, you don't have to know which piece of chocolate on which day caused it. You just get the lesson, you know. So of course you can track it back. If this is a logical law, if this is a natural law that occurs, of course you can eventually. You get the wisdom to see it exactly. Of course, of course. It's not a question of God keeping the plan in his pocket. It's fine to have faith in God. He's at least someone's got a plan if you're a Christian. I'm not being rude. God's got a plan. But right now in the materials, we haven't got a plan. No one knows quite yet. The Buddha says, yeah, you're the one who did it. So of course, when you get enough wisdom, of course you can. Of course you can. That's the logic of this. Do you understand? So now I think we have to talk about the self. We'll jump into the deep end. And go all the way on the wisdom wing to get into the root delusion and how to counteract that. Because all this stuff leads to this. All of Buddha's teachings in the wisdom wing point of view are about how things exist. What exists, what doesn't exist, how things exist. And the essential characteristic of the valid states of mind is to some degree they are in sync with that which exists. And the delusions are like causing us to live in la-la land. They make us mad because we haven't got a clue. We're believing in lies. That's what Buddha's saying. That's why we suffer. We're not in touch with reality. And that's why one of the synonyms for this term, you know, klesha, you know, mental illness or disturbing emotion for the neurotic ones, the word in English is brilliant, but not in other languages. There's no real, but so the English one's great. When the word is delusion. You know, when you're accused of being delusional, someone's accusing you of not being in touch with reality. And this is exactly bullseye for Buddha. That's exactly what he's saying is the key function of all the neuroses. They cause us to not see things as they are, at whatever level. So there's many levels at which we are misconceiving things. He said one level, which is one of his first teachings, which is fairly evident to anybody with half a brain, is that things are impermanent. Things change moment by moment. So in Buddha's teachings, it's very extensive, in particular on what he refers to as subtle impermanence. It's quite subtle. And you can only really, in subtle meditation, cognize this one. That you can't pin things down. Everything is just a constant state of movement. Even if you pin down with time machine, when you do, like the Olympics, or when you do racing and things, and they have this machine that now measures things in thousandths of a second. You can keep breaking them down. You're never going to be able to pin down an exact thing. This is the energy of impermanence. Is this constant state of change. Everything's constantly changing. And I think it's very evident, even at a gross level. We grasp at things as not changing. And I think it's related very strongly to attachment. I use the example of Nicole Kidman, an Australian actress, you know, when she was with Tom Cruise. I read this interview. She said, we will be together until we're 18. So what's that mean? It's very fascinating. That means because of this massive attachment, they're together, karmas come together, they've got the family, they've got the kids, and we all are like that. If our life is going nicely, we take it for granted, don't we? There's this bubble, and of course we all believe that we'll be together tomorrow. We believe we'll be together the next day. We believe our house will be there tomorrow. You believe when you go home tonight, your house will be there. Everybody believes that. Everybody believes it as a scientific certainty. That's fantasy, Buddha says. Things change. People die every day. Houses fall down every day. But because we're attached to our house, she was attached to Tom, she made this assumption, because she couldn't stand the thought of it changing, that we will be together until we're 80. That's an extrapolation. That's a fantasy we add on top, because we can't bear the thought of not having Tom. We can't bear the thought of our child not being there. We can't bear the thought of even our house not being there. It's too painful to even imagine. So we impose upon things this characteristic they just don't have, which is permanence, unchangingness. We particularly are attached to our own sense of self. We can't bear the thought that we would die. It's unbearable for us. This is a really powerful point. Grasping at things as permanent and unchanging. As unchanging. So when attachment gets what it wants, then it's this, now we say, now I've found happiness. In other words, we've got it, we lock it in, and now it's not going to change. But we know in reality, this is utter nonsense, our life every day is telling us this is not true, but we can't bear to hear it. This is an obvious lie the mind tells. You know, as they call it, grasping at permanent things, grasping at permanent me. There's a real belief that I'm permanent, you know, unchanging. Permanent here means unchanging, frozen in space. It is forever. And then what happens when her attachment, the bubble burst, and Tom left her, naturally, her attachment was collapsed, she crashed down to despair, and now look what happened. Now she couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Now she believes that is reality. That's why we kill ourselves, because we can't see that that will ever change. So we're always imposing this concreteness and solidity, and this is not the subtlest mistake. This is really evident, and this is why we suffer so tremendously. So the Buddha's view all the time is, we suffer because what we think about things isn't realistic, isn't true. You know, my beautiful cup, let's say it's my mother's antique cup, and it breaks, and I'm devastated. We think we're devastated because your cup broke. No. You're devastated because I had this fantasy that it wouldn't break, that it shouldn't break, that I couldn't bear the thought of it breaking. We have a misconception in the mind. But these are so primordial, and we take them for granted. It seems like it's being intellectual to say it's a mistake, you know. But this is why we suffer. This is Buddha's point across the board. So what the Buddha's saying, we finally removed all the grosser delusions, got to a more subtle level of our mind, finally removed even the subtlest, deepest delusion, ego grasping, which we're going to talk about, then finally we've seen reality, we realize reality, and there is no longer fear. Fear is the flavor of all the delusions. It's natural. It's not like a distinct state of mind. Fear is the flavor of attachment, of anger, of neurosis, of anxiety, of jealousy, depression, low self-esteem, arrogance, you name it. And when you've rid the mind of these neuroses, even to some degree, to that degree you get less fearful, more courageous, more stable, more joyful, naturally. Naturally. This is the Buddha's view about the mind. So the subtlest mistake we make, the subtlest mistake, the most primordial, the hardest to see, is known, as I said, as ego grasping, this first of these three main delusions. So its function. And all the delusions embellish in a certain way. Attachment embellishes the deliciousness of the cake. Aversion embellishes the ugliness of the boyfriend. They always embellish something. Everything, they all exaggerate. They add extra things on top. So ego grasping, the root delusion, exaggerates the very ontological status itself of the self, the thing, the microphone, whatever exists. This is Buddha's key point, you know. And it's only in meditation we can realize this. We've got to start, like everything, with the intellectual thought, with the theory, you know. So one of the ways Buddha taught this is in the framework of what's known as the two truths. That you've got things that exist conventionally, and then we have the way that things exist ultimately. So basically the universe consists of billions of things, isn't it? you know, microphones, stands, stages, cups. And indeed, since Mr. Steve Jobs came along, the universe probably has double the number of phenomena by now. There's millions of apps and all the things we've created. Fairly recently, 30 years, you know, it didn't exist since the 90s, before the 90s. We're constantly creating new phenomena. It's clear. So there's conventional reality. So Buddha's basically saying these delusions overlay on top of everything we experience various lies. Attachment overlays deliciousness, aversion overlays ugliness, and we go from pillar to post between those two all the time. Ego grasping overlays, like I said, the very fundamental status of things, the subtlest selfness of things onto things. This is the subtlest mistake. So by doing the initial work of working on our mind and lessening these grosser mistakes, it makes it easy to get to the subtler mistake and to remove that one, because that's the one we have to remove. That's when we get liberated from suffering. That's the meaning of the word nirvana. When you cut that one, this is running out again. The batteries are dying quickly. Oh, there it is. It's on again. It's okay. So, okay, let's look at this one then. What Buddha's saying about ultimate reality. They talk about ultimate reality. It's very fascinating. So if it is true that everything that we're conceiving through our senses and through our mind, seeing through our senses and our concepts, we're not seeing them accurately. We're decorating on top qualities that aren't there, as abstract as that sounds to us. But if we're making a mistake about everything we see, we want to first establish conventionally what a thing is, and then we can begin to discuss how it exists. So that means the first step is we have to establish what is something. So conventionally, what's that? You know, Mummy say, well, it's called a cup, darling. And I'll say, what's a cup, Mummy? And she'll give me the definition. This is really crucial in Buddhist philosophy, really fundamentally necessary. So he has to establish what it is. First of all, a definition has two parts. First of all, the first part, it's like you have a name, cup, and then she will tell you about it. She'll give you the meaning, and that's the definition. The first part will tell you, she'll tell me that it's, well, you know, it's that flat-bottomed clay container. And I'll understand that. Oh, sorry, hang on, I've got to sneeze. It's a flat-bottomed clay container, but I'm not happy yet. I don't know what it is yet. But Mummy, what does it do? Now, this is a massive meaning in Buddhist philosophy, the function. This is crucial to understand. So in this case, she will tell me that oh, well, sweetheart, it holds my tea. Well, don't believe her. We'll believe anything anyone tells us. We're suckers, you know. Don't believe her. She's got to prove it, please. We're trying to establish reality here. So she'll get her tea, and she'll pour. And we will both see that it fits the definition. It holds her tea. That's still not enough. She's got to now establish that there is no, in our conventional world as we know it, where cups are accepted, that there's no other valid cognition of that contradicts that definition. This is really intelligent. We do that when it comes to cups and thermoses and microphones, but not when it comes to love and hate. Oh, I love you. Oh, yes, and I love you, Robina. We think we're communicating. I mean, your definition and mine are like different novels, I tell you. If we don't ever have good communication and clear definitions when you come to emotional things, we're like a joke, you know. No wonder we have a problem. So anyway, there's a cup. So now what's this phenomenon? This phenomenon we're called a self. Conventionally, we are a self, a person, a me, an I. They're all synonyms. So is a rat. So is a dog. So is an ant. They're all persons. We're that type of phenomenon. I forget what the definition is. Whatever it is, I forget. So okay, we're a person. We're not a cup. We're not a toilet. We might treat ourselves like one, but we're not a toilet. We're not an iPad. So we should be clear about what that is. So first we are a person. Okay. Now let's look at how we exist and how we don't exist. And what Buddha's saying is, like I said, we impose all these fantasies on top of everything that exists. And we make the same mistake for everything. We give it this ontological status as something having something intrinsic, he says. That's the mistake this ego grasping makes. So attachment makes the mistake of exaggerating the deliciousness. Aversion makes the mistake of exaggerating the ugliness. Arrogance makes the mistake of exaggerating your importance. Low self-esteem exaggerates your unimportance. Whatever, they all exaggerate. Well, ego grasping, the subtlest illusion, exaggerates the very status of something. The self and everything else. Of course, these mistakes are primordially deep. The Hindus were ingenious beings, went as far as they could go in their mind, removing all the neuroses. But Buddha says still there's some subtle mistake left. That's his view, okay? So what he presents in conventional reality, he says that he says that things, the shorthand for how things exist conventionally, he uses the term dependent arising. That everything exists in dependence upon various factors. Interdependence. So it sounds kind of cute, but it's got unbelievable clear meaning in different levels in Buddhist philosophy. And so to understand this is to understand Buddhism, finally. You know? Everything is interdependent, but in very specific ways. So Buddha would present three ways here that he is specifically arguing from three prevailing positions at the time. But he says that they're mistakes we all make in our mind to one degree or another. So the first level at which things exist interdependently, Buddha says, is they exist in dependence upon causes. So my feeling is, okay, no, not my feeling, truth in Buddhist philosophy, that the example of karma, cause and effect, is a powerful example of this first level of dependent arising. So right now, we believe I'm the result of causes, but the causes have got nothing to do with me, have they? They're mummy, daddy, grandma, grandpa, God. Okay, you don't want to blame God, but someone else is my cause, and I'm this innocent victim who got caused by people. And that's not for the Buddha. So hearing of karma, that I am the cause of me, is a kind of tasty way of loosening the grip of ego grasping, because it puts me responsible. It puts me to make me accountable, generally speaking. Already powerful. Now the second one is more tasty, and let's use this as an example. It's not the subtlest mistake we make, but basically Buddha's saying this: everything that exists, now at a more subtle level, in dependence upon its parts, its bits and pieces. So simple enough. It seems simple enough initially. It was a very marvellous discussion to have. Let's have it. So okay, he says that right now this ego grasping, this root delusion deep in our bones, causes us to utterly believe without question, continuously, that among all these parts here, and you establish the parameters of the object called me, it doesn't include the chair, it doesn't include this, this is the parameters, this body here, is the basis, is the parts, this is the parameters. And within here, we have a body. The two main parts of a person are a body and a mind, okay, for the Buddha. A body and a mind. They're the two main components that make up a person, a self, an I. So the Buddha's saying, this ego grasping causes us to utterly believe in the depths of our being, primordially and instinctively and all the time, without question, that there is in here somewhere, among all these thousands of parts of my mind, love, hate, all these bits and pieces of my mind, love, hate, jealousy, kindness, love, all the bits and pieces of my thoughts, millions of parts of my mind, and the millions of parts of my body, this ego grasping causes us to believe utterly and completely that there is among these parts a special part that kind of runs the show, that's called I. Our language expresses this daily. You know, I will say, I have a hand. Well, in a conventional sense, without analysis, that's absolutely true. You can see it right there, there's a hand. But the Buddha's saying we're conflating that. We're making a mistake there. We don't realize it. We are over-exaggerating the status of that I. So one of these examples, like when you do the debates and you study this stuff in the philosophy, one of the many logical arguments you have to use to try and argue with these misconceptions. And one is called, you think about, you know, you say, this is the example. Okay. So if I say to you, I have a table, a saucer, and an iPad. Forget the rest. So naturally, if you look over here to where the sound is coming from, my mouth, and you will look with your eyes, and because you know the English words, I have a table, an iPad, and a saucer, you will look to verify what I say. And it's really helpful if I've spoken the truth, isn't it? If I say I have an elephant here, you'll feel sorry for me, you know? So you can see, and you'll pretty quickly verify that, won't you? And you'll go, yep, she's right. Now, let's do the analysis. Let's see if it's really true. On a conventional sense, forget ultimate. So if that's a true statement, this is really logical. If it's a true statement, you have to point out 4 things, don't you? I is one phenomenon. I said I is one phenomenon. Have, a table is a second phenomenon. Saucer is a third phenomenon. iPad is a fourth. We agree, don't we? So we also agree, don't we, that if that's a true statement, even conventionally, it means that each of those phenomena has to be separate from the others. Would you agree with that? So that means you have to point out an iPad that's independent of a table, meaning in terms of its function. An iPad, to function as an iPad, does not need a table. A saucer, to function as a saucer, does not need a table or an iPad. A Robina, a person, can walk out the door, these 3 are fine. Would we agree with this? It's logical, isn't it? We accept. So that's 4 phenomena, isn't it? And you can point, and if it's a true statement, and this is a massive part of this analysis you have to do in your meditation as well, to try to get to understand this interdependence business, you know. So then, in this particular way, we're talking about how independent of each other in terms of their function. Now I'll make another statement. I have a nose, a hand, and a foot. So you'll want to also prove the same thing conventionally. It will be the same discussion, okay? So how many phenomena did I mention? Well, I in fact mentioned 4. I said I have a hand, a nose, and a foot. You agree? So there's a foot. So a foot does not need a hand to function to walk. Fact. My foot can be cut off. My hand can still hold something. My nose does not need a foot to blow snot, you know. It's a fact. My hand doesn't need a nose or a foot to hold something. These are facts. These are facts. Simple, ordinary, scientific facts. Now, the 4th phenomenon is called I, isn't it? So the logic here is we are giving equal status to that I that we are giving to the foot, the hand, and the nose, as if there were in here a 4th piece that is separate from the other pieces. Well, Buddha says, don't be ridiculous. Don't be absurd. You can't find such a piece. In fact, you don't even need one, baby. It's just an unnecessary embellishment. You've added on top. We've added, and this is the grossest mistake. It's not the real meaning. It's getting to it. We have added, we say the word I, but what we don't realize is this ego grasping is giving it extra status. Like as if you could point it out and go, ha, there the I is. There's the hand, there's the eye, there's the nose. No, you can't possibly do that. One proof of it is this. One proof is this, that you can't find a separate I. Buddha's not saying there is no I, but we think there's a separate I. That's one mistake we make, and this is a gross mistake. That means you can point out in here, among the parts, a piece called I that doesn't depend upon the hand, that doesn't depend upon the nose, that doesn't depend upon the foot, and doesn't depend on all the other bits and pieces. Buddha says, don't be ridiculous. Not only isn't there one, you don't need one. This sounds like hilarious to us. So one proof is this. It's very clear. If the saucer breaks, the iPad's not affected, is it? You agree with that, don't you? It's not affected. So if there is an I that's separate from my hand, right now, if I have a bad hand, I'll say, oh, I'm in such pain. You know, if you insult me, if you insult my nose, I'll say, how dare you insult me? You'll say, no, I didn't insult you. I insulted your nose, Robina. So if there is a separate I in here, the I, like the saucer, when it's broken, like the table, like the iPad, the I won't mind. It'll look on to poor old nose has been insulted and feel sorry for the nose. It won't be affected. But we know we do feel affected. So there is an I there, but as Lama Zopa says, what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't exist. But the point is we want to always point something out. That's the craving we have, it's so stupendous. We want to point something out that's separate, independent, isolated, intrinsic, separate, like an essence, like a thing. You go, there it is. But the Buddha says you can't do that. There isn't such an I. There's no I. But as Lama Zopa says, when you discover the reality of this, it's as if there's no I, but there is. But it's so subtle. So it's a really fine point, you know. So basically we all believe in here. So one marvelous meditation we can do yourself, you know, you can do this process of deconstruction of all the bits and pieces, and it's really, you do it very rigorously. It's one of the meditations you do, to try and prove to ourselves that you don't find that thing in there that we believe is running the show daily. The central player in our universe is me. The central word we use is me. Everything is seen in reference to me. So we give this status to the me, this extra status to the me, as if it were this special little puppeteer in there, or like this mini me, such that if you were to strip away all the bits, cut yourself into pieces, all the bits, nothing left, you'd still believe, aha, now the little me's been found out. There she is, little kind of puppeteer, you know. That's the way of expressing. Buddha says you won't find such a one. You won't find such a one, because such a one does not exist. It's an imposition, it's an exaggeration, it's a distortion, it's an embellishment. We've made it up. Thus we suffer. Any questions about it? Any thought of what the I, where the I is? This is the joke, you know. Buddha says there's no independent I, baby, but don't just believe me, you've got to go search for it. And this is what you learn and study for 40 years in the monasteries, and they go meditate for another 40 to prove it. Because this mistake is so primordial, so subtle, and you can't finally realize it until you've got single point of concentration. Once this lie is cut, you're on the way out of samsara, on the way into your own liberation from nonsense. That's what Buddha says. This is the job of being a Buddhist, to do this job. Any questions, people? Any suggestions what the I might be? Just say what you think.
Not really, but if
Where are
the
you?
I is so subtle,
Yeah.
as if it weren't really,
Yes.
how can we expect it to own stuff? Why do
No,
we
it doesn't. No, that's already it doesn't own. It's a good question. Give me the mic, please.
No, but
No, darling, take the mic. Speak out.
so the question was really if
Put the mic on with you, darling. Put it on or speak into it, one or the other. Just treat it like an ice cream. Put it like this.
It was on.
Sweetie, you just put it like this, like a rock singer, okay?
Okay, is that
That's
better?
That's better.
Thank you. So what I was trying to say earlier was if the I is so
I
subtle.
knew exactly what you said earlier,
Yeah.
and I'm answering you.
Okay.
But you can't hear it and I understand that. But please state your question.
The question was
Yeah, good.
our expectations.
Yes.
Actually, we have multiple expectations of the self. So on the one hand, we expect, and these are conflicting tendencies.
What,
we
darling?
expect the self to own stuff, to own.
That's right. We have to
thoughts,
own responsibility for our
to
qualities.
own
Yes. That's right.
actions, including
Exactly.
past actions.
Yeah.
At the same time, contradictory. We say.
No, not contradictory. It's just it's very subtle. It's not. Keep saying your question.
The second part was more in terms of habits. Sometimes we say, so we expected the self to take ownership.
That's right.
And the primary task would be to know thyself.
That's right.
Like the ancient
That's right.
Greeks, much less so within Christians, but with the Greeks that was clear. Know
That's right.
thyself,
That's
the
right.
primordial
Yep,
task.
exactly.
At the same time, we say ignorance is bliss.
Well,
So
no,
do not-
Buddha doesn't say that. You might. Buddha doesn't say that.
Yeah.
Ignorance is not bliss.
I'm
No, so
talking
get to
about-
what's your question? The question is.
How do we reconcile?
Your question was,
that?
if there's no self, what is taking responsibility? is what
Yeah,
you're asking.
exactly.
The conventional self. That's the answer.
Okay.
So it's not tricky. That means we have to understand what in this presentation, what the definition of conventional self is, what it means by that, and what the what doesn't exist. What does exist and what doesn't exist. And it's quite. This is the point that Lama Zopa is indicating by that seemingly clever statement, that it's as if it doesn't exist. It's just a way of interpreting and understanding that meaning of what actually does exist. But the point is, you can't point something out and say, there's the self. It's not as if you have to have a microscope to see the tiny self. It's not as if there's a big fat self or there's a tiny baby self. It's not like that. We're trying to pin it down, and that's the key point. The meaning of interdependence is you can never pin anything down, because it's an interdependent environment. Nothing can be pointed out. Nothing can be pinned down. This is the grosser level. This is the answer. I know it doesn't satisfy you. So the only way to understand this is to study the Buddhist view and see if you can get it yourself. I'm not trying to be clever or anything, not that I know much, but I'm just saying what I have to say. So, conventionally, conventionally, every word I've been saying up until now, I've been saying I this, I that, we this, I that. It's true. It's conventionally true. So what we're trying to do here is establish what that I means. That's all. But it's absolutely true. We do have to take responsibility. That is exactly right. And what does take responsibility, if you want to, okay, if you want to put it like this, the two parts of your I are your body and your mind. Okay? In this discussion. So the part of you that does it, the responsibility is the mind. Of course it is. It's the mind that does the thinking, it's the mind that does the work. But then you use the same analysis to find the intrinsic mind, and you won't find that either. So the same logic about there's no I, it's as if there's no I. Also, there is a mind, but it's as if there's no mind. So we have to use, in other words, conceptuality is the only way we can work with things. That's how we live. We live at a conceptual level, and necessarily the concepts are totally superficial. They're just descriptions, but we give this extra power to things. So we have to, on the one hand, use conceptuality, but treat it like as light as a feather. And those conceptuality leads to the subtler experience of the truth, which we can only get non-conceptually in our mind, in single point of concentration, in the depths of meditation, after years and years of work. Okay? So we've got to start somewhere, which is conceptual. Yes?
Can I think a minute? Thank you.
So this is on a very simple level where Buddha would completely disagree with the Christians or the Muslim, or the Hindus or the Muslims. They say there is a body, there is a mind, and there is a soul. That's very clear. He says no. He uses the word mind as one. He doesn't have a third component in it. Do you understand? But the words, yeah, anyway, you go on.
So
Yeah.
continuing this discussion,
Yes.
what is it that transcends from one garden to the next garden?
Consciousness. Your mind is a continuity that's beginningless and endless.
And
And then all the things, okay, all the things we do say and think every second imprint on our mind tendencies, program our mind with tendencies and habits, so that consciousness carries those tendencies and habits that then will manifest in a new form in the next life, where it'll conjoin with another egg and sperm of a lion mummy. So if you correct the cause of lots of killing and harming and lots of kind of just not awareness and harming sentient beings very strongly, you program your mind with those tendencies, and they multiply very powerfully. And when you die, the karmic seed of killing will be triggered, and that'll cause you to be super attracted to the lion mother, and you'll run like a magnet. And then your mind, then that will activate all those parts of your mind that suit a lion body, and get a lion's suit a lion's mind, and you have a body that suits a lion's mind. Claws to rip out the guts of buffaloes daily for breakfast. Those four elements suit your mind. Now your mind conjoins with those four elements, you know, and you act out. And so all your other virtues, they're all buried. They're all there. Nothing ever goes astray. All your kindness and intelligence, your Buddha nature, are buried underneath. But as a lion, you can only express what lions do, you know. Then your karma runs out, and you have another one, like that. So that's why they say, at least as a human, we've got enough ability, hopefully, to use our intelligence to start working on this before we leap into the lion's body. Try and at least avoid that one first.
And, yes, and coming back to my first question
Yeah.
from the other session.
Yeah, that's right. How we create things.
I was discussing about all the natural environment,
Yes.
and you were saying that it is actually the mind that
Also the
creates
future
it
past
as
karma.
well.
Yes. Let me try roughly explain it, very roughly, okay?
Yes.
Okay. So if we take this model that the universe consists of the four elements and minds, trillions upon trillions of mind streams. So according to this model, which is from the Vajrayana, or the more advanced esoteric teachings in Buddhist philosophy and practice, according to that, and this is the same model the Tibetan medical system uses, okay? It's very interesting. So they talk about the universe made of minds, and then all of our minds are inextricably linked to our own set of the four elements. This is just said to be the way it is. No one made it this way. So at the gross, we have gross consciousness. So the way it manifests now, our gross consciousness is our sensory consciousness, which clearly needs eyeballs and skin and nerves and ears. And so this gross body we have is inextricably linked to our grosser level of consciousness. So when we die or when we go to sleep, it's the same thing. The gross consciousness ceases, doesn't it? And then you'll have dreams, won't you? That's your subtle consciousness. And that is inextricably linked to its own set, this particular this subtle physical energy. And the way they describe it in the Tibetan medical system or in the Hindu tradition, in yoga, you've got these subtle nervous systems, 72,000 subtle channels throughout your body. Coursing through those channels are all these different wind energies, the prana. And it's like 15 years they study this medical system. It's similar to the Chinese medical system. It's a very different one from our physical, allopathic one, isn't it? So all these wind energies are coursing through those channels, and states of mind are all linked to those wind energies. So this is the thing, the Tibetan doctor will feel your pulses. She'll feel that one particular wind is really out of balance, and she'll know that's part of your, it's connected to your attachment. That's why you're having kind of panic attacks and anxiety, because the energy is berserk, and the impact of the physical is impacting upon the mental, because they're connected. So when you take your herbal medicine, that calms the wind energies down, and which in turn helps you calm your anxiety down. Do you understand what I'm saying? So okay, in some of these texts, as Lama says, there are these detailed descriptions of this intimate relationship between internal energy, which is mind, and external, which is the 4 elements. Okay? So there's this subtle elements, which our mind is conjoined with, which connects to this body. So for example, even just ordinarily, if you are angry every day, that's your mind, right? It's very disturbed, very turbulent, very negative. That pollutes your wind energies. That could cause you to get diseases. That's causing disease. That's the cause of disease. But that continues, and eventually in the next life you'll be born with a lot of sickness caused by the anger polluting your wind energies, and that you carry that energy with you in those elements. And then, as Lama Zopa says, first of all, the anger impacts upon your own elements, which causes sickness and over lifetimes, and then in turn even impacts upon the external elements, creating the imbalance of the external elements. Equally with virtue. So if we're born, like, you know, let's say you're born in an environment that's very beautiful, with peaceful and lovely flowers, the water's pure, you know, the air's unpolluted, and there's a group of people who live there. Well, that's their collective karma due to their own past virtue, their non-killing, their non-stealing, their non-harming. They all collectively practice virtue, and they get born in a place where their collective virtue over time has impacted upon the elements and makes them peaceful and sweet and tasty and harmonious. So the elements from the Buddha's point of view have no power of their own. They're inert. But minds are the main source of everything. So by what your mind does impacts upon your own elements, which in turn causes the kind of bodies you have, and in turn, and we do that collectively, impacts upon the external elements, which literally produces your environment. Whether it's a volcano, whether it's ugly, whether it's polluted, or whether it's, you know, peaceful. That's collective karma. Or it can be individual. Environmental karma would be you might die from eating a peanut. Everybody else gets nourished by a peanut. That's personal. But maybe another place where the water is shed by everybody and is completely polluted. So the external causes are, of course, what we do to pollution. That's what causes. But the long term, we're talking about 1,000 lifetimes. The long-term cause is the collective negative karma of the sentient beings who are born there now. I mean, it's described in much more detail. We don't need creating, what it says. We do fine making a mess of the universe, creating it and creating blissful universes as well. That's the Buddha's view. And it's a natural law. It's not punishment, it's not reward, there is no punisher, there is no rewarder, no one's doing it to us. We all collectively do it. But I mean, we all blame everybody else. I'm not being rude here, but we even blame God, you know, for doing it. I'm not being rude. If you have faith in God, go for it. Buddha says, where we do it. I mean, I just find this a very interesting view, you know. It might be stupid, but I'm enjoying it. Yes. Microphone, please. Yeah.
Can I make the statement?
What's your life? Yeah.
I have a mind.
You do, yeah.
Okay, but if I make the statement, I have a pen,
Yes.
I'm separate than the pen.
Yeah, you are, absolutely.
So is the I separate than the mind, from the mind?
That's the point, honey. That's the point I'm making. No, that's the point. But we think it is. That's the point I gave with my example. That's the point.
So,
No.
so it's paradoxical.
No, it's not paradoxical.
Well,
No, it's not paradoxical. No, please, forgive me. It's not paradoxical. It is logical, but we already, as we even say the word I, are overstating its status. That's the point.
So then is there an I?
There is an I conventionally, but that's, as I said, so subtle, it's as if there's not. When we say, is there something, our deepest instinct is to pin something down and make it actually separate, and you can't do that to anything.
It's paradoxical syntactically.
What?
Syntax.
What? No, never.
Well, actually it is.
Never paradoxical. Not paradoxical. Now, paradoxical means it's a seeming contradiction, and you got to live with it. No, no such
within that
thing.
statement, I have a pen, but I can take away the pen.
Yes, you can.
Separate.
Yes, you can.
I have a mind.
Yes, you have.
But you said I can't separate myself from my mind.
No, you can't.
Then where's the paradox if not
It's not a
contradiction?
paradox. It's just to learn to understand it. Honey, I'm not trying to be insulting to you, and I can only say so many things in a day.
I don't see it as
But
insulting.
you study this stuff for 40 years to get the meaning, and then you meditate for another 40 to hopefully experience the truth of it. So there is an eye, there is a cup, there is okay, let's just do another level of this one. Let's do the subtlest level of emptiness. This is emptiness. This is the meaning of what they call emptiness. The subtlest level of this view of dependent arising. Finally, that's a grosser mistake. And Buddha says, by really being realizing this one, it still doesn't eradicate ego grasping. But the subtlest meaning is that there is no anything separate from the mind that calls it that. And that's the main one. That's the main one to think about, the subtlest one. We can go in stages. So that everything is merely labelled. So things do exist, but merely labelled. Merely labelled. So maybe, what time is it? 5 o'clock. It's like a tea, isn't it? Let's have a cup of tea or something? I think so. Or a pee-pee break or something. So yeah, anyway, we did start this conversation. But yes. Go on.
I agree with you.
Oh, I'm happy.
just trying to
I'm very happy, Buddha. I'm happy.
understand
Buddha's happy you agree with me.
that the eye is not separate from the mind, but relative to the examples that were used,
Yeah.
it seems like you could be able to separate the two.
No, you can't. This is the argument to prove you can't find an eye that's functionally independent of the mind is that if, or the hand for that matter, the hand, use the hand as an example. We know, just experientially, when your hand is hurting, you say, I'm in pain, don't you? Nothing wrong with that. You agree, don't you? You say that, don't you?
You could say there is pain.
No, we can, and we would if we were a yogi, but we say naturally, I'm in pain. We say that. And so, without analysis, that's a perfectly reasonable statement. But what the Buddha's saying is, when we say that, we are already totally, the ego grasping is overstating the status of that eye as if it were a separate piece. So another way of putting it, I will say, I have a hand. Don't we? We say that. And that's two things, two nouns. But that within the discussion of this pieces here, you can point out a hand, but you can't point out the eye. Within that framework. If you look at the eye itself, look at the hand, you can't point out a hand if you look at the hand itself. My hand has 5 fingers. I've got a finger. No, my finger has parts. Oh, I've got a top of a finger. No, the top of my finger has parts. You always will have to, you can never separate, but you always can still say conventionally there is an eye. As for convenience, for conceptual language, but you can't point one out that isn't the other bits. If you could, then the eye wouldn't mind if the hand got hurt. Like the iPad doesn't mind if the cup breaks. They're not functionally dependent on each other.
So the eye is functionally dependent upon the mind.
Utterly.
If the eye is functionally dependent upon the mind, it can't be the mind.
It isn't the mind.
Is it dependent upon, or is it?
They exist interdependence. The mind, okay. My cup has a base. Just without discussion, it's a truth, isn't it? Look, would you agree?
Yeah.
So it's two things in this. Cup and base, it's two things, right? You agree it's two nouns. No, keep it, answer each one step. Is it two nouns? Did I say two nouns?
Yeah.
Well, don't say yeah. I did say two. I said cup and I said base. They're two nouns.
Yeah.
You agree?
Yeah.
So the instinct we have is, oh good, we can point out a base, but you can't. Take the base away and you don't have a cup. So in that sense, cup exists in dependence upon its parts, but you won't find a cup apart from the parts. But nevertheless, cup will function exactly to hold your tea as you established. Same with everything.
So the mind has an eye, or the eye has a mind?
Oh no, the eye is the noun and it possesses a mind, but you won't find an eye that's separate from the mind. The mind is not the eye. So the eye is not the mind, and it's not the mind, and it's not going to be tricky. That's how they talk. I want to read you tomorrow from Lama Yeshe's wonderful book on Mahamudra, which is this marvelous book on meditation, of how to realize this stuff in meditation. It's very delicious.
No, it's vastly interesting, because now we go from noun to subject to object.
What?
Right? Because, right, I have a hand, subject has an object, but they're interdependent upon each other. But they're not the same thing.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. They're not the same thing.
Okay.
But they're dependent. That's the way to put it. Let's have a cup of tea break and a pee-pee break or whatever break you want. Okay? I'll sit here and read my iPad.